Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, collectors of all ages, it is Aussieverse, and we are back, baby. Now, we were meant to go live in an hour, but that old tricky daylight savings has mucked things up once again. Not only that, but the time zones between Australia and America is always just that just challenge, isn't it? But anyway, we are here to discuss Frost Road Kickstarter. And before we do want to give a massive shout out to our paid members. They are our for lifers. All of these names above help contribute to Aussieverse in the most appealing way. But don't fret if you are not a paid member. That's cool. The best way to support Aussieverse is simply by subscribing to the videos, liking them, and commenting. So check out Rob's Fat Stack, Simple Simon, and still only 35 cents for their respective channels. Now, what is Frost Road? That is what we are here to find out today. So let me introduce you to, first and foremost, Keith Arem, the creator, writer of Frost Road, CEO of PCB Productions, and also joined all the way from the States, we have Mr. Chris Yates, the director, special projects and outreach. How you doing, fellas?
Hey, nice to be here. Thank you for having us in an hour early because of the American time standards here. Sorry about that.
I'm loving the energy. I'm loving the Aussie energy, my friend. It's what exactly we need on a Friday night.
And that was it. We've been cut loose.
We do want to say thank you for people that have rocked up early. Christina Payne, always great to see you, as well as my man, James Abel and KJB. Thank you very much and for joining us on this wonderful Saturday morning. Chris, Keith, what's going on, guys? Do you want to introduce yourselves a little bit before we talk about the book?
Yeah, absolutely. Chris, you want to go first?
Sure. So I'm Chris Yates. I'm the director of special projects and outreach here at PCB. Basically, my job is to help Keith facilitate these kind of fun Kickstarters and these new kind of original IPs that we're doing. And before then, I was originally at Beau Flynn Picture Company, which was the gentleman who did Rampage and Black Adam and things like that. And then after that, I went to United Talent Agency, where I specialized in graphic novel IP adaptation, where I worked with James Tynan, Joshua Williamson, Boom Studios, Dynamite, things like that. And then I pivoted to Disney, where I also focused on the adaptation side for television. And then I worked at Massive Publishing, and now I'm here with Keith. So Keith, I'll switch it over to you.
Yeah. And so my name's Keith Arem. Thanks for having me. And for both of us here, we're super excited to be on the show with you. I run PCB Productions here in LA. We run recording studios. Most people know us these days for all of our big video game work. So we work in performance capture and doing dialogue recording and motion capture and all the things that you see for a lot of big AAA video games. So we've worked on 11 of the Call of Duty games and Titanfall and Spider-Man and Prince of Persia and Ghost Recon, and we're doing Street Fighter and Monster Hunter and all these other fun games. So a lot of people have always known us for being pretty intimate in the performance side of video games. I was also in the music industry. I was in Contagion and Biohazard on Capitol Records doing angry industrial music with Frontline Assembly and Nine Inch Nails and stuff like that. And then more recently, over the past several years, started to develop our own stuff. And that was really where Chris and I came together on sort of taking a lot of our original properties and starting to place those for film and television and animation and getting our own stuff off the ground. So some of our first books, like Ascend, that we did with Image Comics, which was the #1 book for them when that book came out. I had started to work with artists like Christopher Schei. And it was a great experience because we had graphic novels that could be optioned for movies, but also really work very well in the comic book space. And so now, between our comic books and our video games and our graphic novels, Chris and I are kind of focused on bringing together the Kickstarter community so we could self-publish and self-fund a lot of these original ideas that we're doing here at PCB.
Wow. Sounds like a busy schedule.
We got plenty of time to do nothing else.
We're just going to flick the light on 1 sec.
Let's do it.
There you go. Just a little bit better. I wasn't prepared. Okay, so we're just gonna wing all this. Okay, so Frost Road. Now, this looks absolutely freaking amazing. This apocalyptic horror graphic novel. Let's go take a look at that before we get into some questions, I reckon. So we've got it right here. I'm going to push us to the top so the screen's a little bigger. Now, if I press play on this video, is the music owned by yourself, or just make sure, because otherwise we'll get the cross from.
No, that's all our stuff in there, and that's all cleared. And then, or some of it, I think this is maybe part of an excerpt of a interview that Chris and I did a little while ago.
All right, let's check it out. Ladies and gentlemen, Frost Road.
So with Christopher's style specifically, and it's so photorealistic in that really painty way, when you're writing it, was it interesting, revolutionary? Was it like, how did you feel like your words coming out of that? Like, as you said, it's almost like a film on paper, like to see it in that unique way. Was that just interesting to see like your words on that way?
It's kind of cool because it's an ensemble cast, right? Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of characters in the story that don't trust each other. Mm-hmm. And in some respects, because I come from a video game space, the main character has a very video game arc, in a sense that he wakes up with amnesia, doesn't know who he is, and he kind of finds who he is through the story. Mm-hmm. And the reveal of his involvement in this whole full circle story that happens in the story comes out at the end, and it's kind of a fun reveal. The flip side is that he's paired up with this woman named Hannah, and she wakes up in the middle of this thing. She was a resident in the town and just wanted to get out of this place, and now that everyone's dead, she just wants it to go back to the way it was. Right. So it, in a sense, becomes more of her story than the protagonist's story, because she has this realization that she's appreciating of what she lost that's there, and she finds it within Chris, like the main guy, who they don't trust each other at the beginning, and they also don't trust each other at the end. So writing characters like that was challenging, because you had to remember this guy maybe doesn't know anything, and maybe we don't even trust our own protagonist for a while, and maybe he knows something and he's not leading on, and when does he start to remember, which he starts to do, and when that moment is, the arc of his character is come to full realization of how he plays a part in all of this. And each of the characters kind of has that, and they're all tied in some event that happened before the events of Frost Road happened, just before, and the story picks up minutes afterwards. So it's kind of a fun writing exercise to be able to do a story that takes place like in one day with a whole bunch of characters that either don't know who they are or don't trust each other, and all have to come back and reveal sort of the real secret behind it.
Of course.
And so it was a good experiment, and for one of my first major scripts, I really enjoyed it.
All right. Well, I've got to tell you, the first thing that draws me to this is, and this I hardly ever say about Kickstarters, because I'm usually always about the story over the art. But if you have seen Aussieverse, you will know that I'm a big fan of art that is very, very realistic. I'm not a big fan of the cartoony sort of work, which I know I'm probably a little bit in the minority there, but this art has immediately drawn me in and just gone, what is this? This looks amazing. So tell us a little bit about it. I know you just did in that video, but if people are tuning into this for the first time and don't know anything about it, why should they buy this book?
Yeah, this is a story that we had initially envisioned as a motion picture that I was going to direct just before COVID. And the film is a psychological survival apocalyptic thriller that takes place in this small town called Frost Road. And it's the story of a guy that wakes up from a car crash in the middle of the forest outside of this town and goes for help. He's injured and realizes that this town has been completely wiped out. But it seems that they've been destroyed by themselves, that they've torn themselves apart. And what's doing this seems to be some invisible signal or wave or something that he seems to be immune to. but he can't hear it, he can't see it, he can't feel it. But definitely any of the survivors, if they're still alive, are tearing themselves apart whenever these waves come through town. And so we kind of refer to this when we've been talking to people about it, like, how do you do the elevator pitch? And it really is a zombie movie in reverse, because this is a guy that is trying to keep these ticking time bombs alive and trying to get them out of the town of Frost Road. So it becomes this psychological thriller, because any of the survivors that are there, they don't trust each other. They don't know why he's immune. He doesn't know why some other people are there. And some of them know him and some of them don't. But he can't remember anything because of the car crash and the amnesia at the beginning of the story. So it kind of puts everybody on edge. And it's got this heavy weight and atmosphere to it. And I think Christopher Schei's artwork perfectly captures that. Chris and I have always loved working together, and his painterly style, I think, brings a lot of that just weight and dread to the kind of the atmosphere of the story. And then the team we have around us is just incredible. We've got Trevor Goring, who worked on the storyboards for us, and Trevor had done X-Men and Watchmen and a lot of other motion pictures. RJ Cooper, who's also our editor. Chris, who's on the line with us today, is our director of special operations. So he's been helping us sort of kind of get out to the Kickstarter community to kind of bring together all of the fans and all the press and everyone to kind of see what we're doing and finding new opportunities for us. And then we have all these great actors, like you saw Yuri Lowenthal and Chris Jai Alex and Edo Ross, who kind of helped us with some photo reference. So when Christopher was painting, we could keep the character references consistent. And now that we're on Kickstarter, this is a great way for us to connect directly with our audience and our fans.
Yeah, this looks really killer. I've got to admit, it really looks good. Let's check out how you can purchase Frost Road. So you've got the first tier, which is $20, digital exclusive. So that would be the cheapest option if you just want to dip your toes in the water and check out what it is. Otherwise, if you're not into the digital and you're a deluxe hardcover collector like myself, then you'll want to go the tier 2, which is the $40 one. It's a stunning hardcover edition of Frost Road. After that, this also includes digital behind the scenes featurette, featuring concept art, project history, and exclusive commentary. Tier 3 is the premium acrylic slipcase edition, and how do you say no to a slipcase? Come on, $60. Check that out. That's gonna look great on the shelf.
This thing is a beast, dude. This thing is a weapon in itself, and it's cool because it's frosted, and inside, what you're gonna be able to see is when the book is inside, you're gonna be able to see the Frost Road cover through the frosted ice and the glass. So this case is just beautiful. And it's a whole nother level for a graphic novel. And then the book itself is 250 pages, and it'll be in hardcover. So we're going to do a premium print on the book. So this is going to be just a beautiful sort of coffee table presentation for the book. And that's why we have those 2 tiers available for that.
Yeah. Okay. Oh man. Okay. Now this also has the same stuff as the other hardcover as well. Tier 4 for $100, which is only limited to 100 backers. This has a live industry Q&A with the creators. Session with Keith and Brendan Humphreys discussing their careers in gaming, film, and comics. You can ask direct questions about storytelling, breaking into the industry, and the making of Frost Road. This tier also includes behind-the-scenes documentary featurette, giving a deeper look into the creation of Frost Road, the stunning acrylic slipcase edition, exclusive digital edition, and your name in a special thank you section of the digital edition. We have more tiers. This is for 150. This is only limited to 50 backers. This is the artist and storytelling masterclass that I know a lot of people would very much be interested in. This is an exclusive pre-recorded masterclass from Christopher Schei and Trevor Goring, breaking down their artistic process, digital painting techniques, and storytelling in comics. One exclusive pre-recorded masterclass from Keith and Brandon, teaching world building, character development, and storytelling across gaming, comics, and film. Let's see. You've got the Q&A session plus all of the previous bonuses. You then have the $250 tier, which is an interactive creator masterclass. Again, limited to 50 backers only. This is an interactive virtual masterclass with Keith and Brandon offering deeper industry insights from 2 specialized tracks and Q&As. This tier includes everything from the previous tiers as well. You also have limited to only 25 backers, tier number 7 for $350, an exclusive virtual meet and greet with the cast and creators. This is one private virtual meet and greet with Keith, Christopher Shy, and a select voice actor from Frost Road, also including everything in the past tiers. We then have, wow, $500. You get to VIP San Diego Comic-Con meet and greet, limited to only 15 backers. I will say that your travel is not included. You will need to organize that yourself. But if you can get your ass to San Diego Comic-Con, you get to have a private in-person meet and greet with Keith and select talent. That is awesome. Plus everything in the previous backers. We're not done. There's also tier number 9 for $750, limited to 10 backers only. You get the virtual one-on-one mentorship session with Keith covering writing, directing, and breaking into entertainment, or one virtual one-on-one portfolio review with Christopher Shy for artists. Plus everything else in the backers kit. And we're still not done. You get tier 10 for $1,500. This is limited to only 8 backers, a private PCB production studio tour and master class. This is an exclusive tour of PCB productions in Los Angeles, 1-person masterclass with Keith Arem, 1 VIP private behind-the-scenes PCB production session. Holy moly, plus everything else in the backer kit. There's tier number 11, $3,000, limited to 5 backers only, Hollywood Executive Industry Access. This is an executive producer credit in Frost Road digital copy, plus the VIP access to behind-the-scenes production updates on the Frost Road motion picture adaptation via Zoom or email. Also included is everything that we've already discussed. And you've also got 12 tier, dropping down the price again. This is for the retailers, $550. They love to support their local stores. Contact them if you'd like to arrange a special in-store appearance or promotion. This would include 5 softcover editions, 5 slipcase editions, 10 book plates signed by Keith and Christopher Shy. That's a value of $400. And you also have all of these add-ons. You can get $40 autographs from Yuri, $40 autograph from Chris, Jai, Alex, creator autographs for $160 and actor autographs, plus $40 for additional deluxe hardcovers and $60 for additional premium acrylic slipcase edition of Frost Road. Now, you've also got the early bird bonuses. The first 200 backers who reserve any physical tier will receive a Frost Road Christopher Shy exclusive print and Trevor Goring hand-numbered storyboard print and Keith Arem manuscript screenplay expert. Ooh, okay. What else? Are we done? Is there more?
There's more.
No, that's great. Oh my God. I was just going to say, my friend, you're the first person to actually go through it all, and I appreciate it because you are explaining it wonderfully. I know you're reading it, but thank you. You're championing, my friend.
This is amazing.
That's my job, mate. That's my job.
I want to back this campaign now. What the? This is awesome.
It does say, since our graphic novel is already complete, as you just saw as well, their campaign's main goal is to fund printing and fulfillment. However, by hitting a higher funding tier, they can expand Frost Road beyond the book to create a fully immersive audio drama experience. That's pretty freaking sweet, man. And they've also got their Frost Road. The 20 grand is already funded. 40 grand is the next tier, which is to produce and release the first audio drama episode as a free bonus for all backers. Wow. Okay. Oh, and yep, okay. We've also got all of this. Now, if you guys want to know where to find this, obviously you can go to Kickstarter. You simply type in Frost Road and it will pop up. Otherwise, you can go and click on the link in the description, which will look something like this. Okay. Dudes, this looks killer. I got to admit, this looks really, really good. So how you doing? You've got 120 backers. You've still got nearly a month to go, but we're not there yet. So we do need more people to back this, and you better believe I'll be doing the same thing. Okay. All right. Now, let's bring back the screen here. All right, guys. So what I guess what comes first to you guys when making a comic book? Is it the story or the art?
Man, the beautiful thing about working in graphic novels and comics is that it is that marriage of both, right? And the idea is that obviously it's the story and the characters that are going to bring you back and be emotionally grounded and want to, follow the characters and their story and what they're going through. But it's an artistic art form, right? It's not a film and it's not a TV and it's not a video game. And the story progresses as you turn the pages. So the artwork, I think, is equally as important as the story and the characters, even though a writer would argue one way and the artist would argue the other way. This is the perfect marriage of that. And I think one of the reasons why Christopher and I love working together so much is that we both have a really strong appreciation for both sides of that. Christopher loves the story and the characters and really wants to understand the emotional backing of these characters. And for me, I have such an appreciation of the artwork. I grew up with things like Arkham Asylum and Heavy Metal Magazine and stories that everything was painted and everything was hand done to the level of a cover, but every panel was painted that way. And so I really have that appreciation of the artwork. And I feel that you can't have one without the other in this medium.
Yeah, it's a good answer. What inspired you to pursue a career in comic book design?
For me, I love telling stories in a variety of different ways. And obviously people know me for what I do in video games, but a lot of times I'm working on the performance, or I'm working with the actors, or I'm writing or producing. And in music, the same way. You're telling a story through music. I think in comics and in graphic novels, you can tell a story that is different than what's going to be in the movie. And it doesn't have to be just regurgitating the same story that you saw in the film or exactly a derivative of what it is in the other mediums. It's its own format, and it's a very immersive format in the sense that like you get really lost in these characters and these worlds that you can build and visualize much bigger than you could with a whole fleet of visual effects, teams and CG and all this other kind of work that's there. So I really love the idea that you can take a very, very large concept and distill it down to drawings and have people get into that world and love your characters and your story, but be lost in this giant space that was just painted and put together by a handful of people.
Yeah. That's the wrong button. I'm really digging this this art, man. It's so good. And also the lettering as well. I like how it's not that traditional word bubbles. It makes it kind of creepier seeing it like this. I really, really love it.
It's a little harder to follow, I think, because you don't have that bubble and that balloon that's there. But at the same time, it feels to me like it, and the way we placed it is we wanted this like hand-drawn, scratchy dialogue. And as long as we're placing it roughly where the characters are talking, it's almost like a subtitle that's floating there. And you'll notice there's different fonts for different things. We use sound. Sound's a very big element and character in the book itself. So by using words and onomatopoeia and other things that you would see in comic books, like the biff and pow and other things for an explosion, but since sound is an element in this, we wanted that to hear the screeching of tires and the sound waves that are rippling through the town. And when people are tearing themselves apart, that sound is a character. And so the fonts and the way we do the text is really important to merge in with the artwork. And you'll notice that it's blurred and it's shaking and it's doing things where it's not just fonts that are on top of things. The words themselves are art. And we really love that aspect of the book.
So can people expect a one and done, or is this going to be ending on some sort of world building? There's going to be a continuation, or what can people expect without giving anything away? I don't know if you can answer that.
Yeah. So for this one specifically, there is a singular narrative. Morning, Troy. Nice to meet you.
Good to see you.
That Keith and Christopher have crafted. So that is one aspect of the IP. But as you said so eloquently in the stretch goals, we were looking to expand this world of Frost Road with Dead Meat. James and Chelsea are wonderful friends of ours, and we're very grateful that they're partnering with us to expand into an audio drama of Frost Road and what that could potentially look like, and just exploring all those worlds. And we're also going to be doing a thing called It's Blind Terror. So how does that sound sonically within this expansion? And, what can you do with that audio drama in Frost Road? And so to answer your question, we are looking to expand. We're going to hopefully do that in the stretch goals.
And one of the other things that people are going to find out about us is that obviously people know our history in video games and PCB over the years of all the projects we've been involved with. But this is really one of the first Kickstarters that's going to launch what PCB is going to be doing as a brand and with the community. And as you can see, and as you were pointing out with all those reward tiers, a lot of our rewards are giving back to the community, right? You're doing master classes and Q&As and meet and greets. And that's not to be pretentious and saying we're better than anybody else that we're going to teach, but we're very much involved in the community. We teach at USC. We have classes called Are You Game, where we're working on technical acting for actors breaking into the video game business. PCB and our work, we've worked on over 700 productions and brought in over $50 to $60 billion worth of titles. So people might not know our names directly because obviously it's the franchises of the big games and projects that we're known for working on. But a lot of people who are trying to get their careers started and breaking into comic books or getting into film or getting into video games or acting, we really wanted to kind of give back to the community and also give back to the Kickstarter community. And so as we're going to have a line of products that come out, we'll have other scripts and other books and other projects that are going to be announced as early as San Diego Comic-Con of this year. So instead of just asking for funding to develop the story, this is a project that's already finished. We had already written this and finished it during COVID. And so the funding we're doing right now is to have fulfillment and shipping and printing for these books. And we'll have them in our fans' hands by San Diego Comic-Con in July. And the great thing is our next project gets announced right on the heels of that. So in this July, people are going to start to see where our next projects are going. And we're really excited to kind of start fulfilling very quickly and not have our fans wait too long to see what our next work is going to be.
Yeah, see, that's actually really, really attractive to me. As a guy that does back a few Kickstarters, one of the things that, and I know it's nature of the beast, you can't really get upset with it, but it is a little frustrating when you do back something. And I've been waiting like on average about a year for each project that I do back. And when you get it, it's great because you're like, oh yeah, I backed this so long ago. But to be able to receive a product that you've paid for in a relatively short time, that's pretty cool. That's really cool.
And I think our history and our work kind of speak for themselves. So that's why we wanted to give people the confidence. And if you see our campaign, that's why it's so robust, is that we really felt that rather than be too reliant on shipping and merchandise and a lot of other things, we felt that some digital offerings are more immediate. They're more powerful because now, like what we're doing right now, we're live and we're able to have a conversation here for fans to be part of this and trying to be very cognizant of making sure that those fans do feel that their investment does pay off. And it's great to have a signature. It's great to have that book. And obviously that's first and foremost. If we just sell to our backers and people get the hardcover and the deluxe acrylic, we'd be very happy. But I feel that giving back to this community and supporting not only the fans, but other creators, and some of the stretch goals that we haven't announced yet, is that if we exceed our goals, we're very much on track right now in just the first week to, I think we're already over 30% of the way there just in our first week. And we still have about almost a month to go. And we have a lot of surprises in store for all of our fans this month as we progress. But one of the goals that we haven't even announced yet is if we exceed our goals, some of the funding that's coming in is going to go back into the Kickstarter community. It's not for us to make a profit on the book. It's more for us to find other Kickstarters and other creators and invest in them. And so I think we have an interview coming out with Sam and the Kickstarter team, I think this week or next week, and that'll talk a little bit more about that and the stretch goals that we're doing, not just like the audio drama we're doing with Dead Meat, but literally our incentives for us to find other creators that need a voice, that don't have as much experience as we do, and to say that, you know, guys, we're not trying to say we're better than anyone. We just have a little bit more history, and maybe we can give back a little bit rather than just some successful Kickstarter that just made a whole bunch of money off of it. I think that this is a community that really is going to empower creators to do what we're doing, is not wait for that elusive deal, or you're going to get a film deal or a book publishing deal. And those are all fantastic. And we would love to have films and other deals of our things. And we'll be announcing those kind of things. But at the same time, I think a lot of creators don't know where to start, and they don't know how to get in touch with their audience. And like what you're doing here with us right now, this is part of that community outreach of saying, we're very approachable. We love the work we're doing, and we want to hear from the fans, and we want them to tell us what they like and what they don't like, and what things are exciting. And if they think that, a class about a portfolio review and meeting with, Christopher Schei and learning how he got started, or Trevor Goring breaking into motion pictures and doing storyboards for films, and be able to have your artist portfolio reviewed by them and giving you that one-on-one feedback. I don't know another time when the audience has had that much of a direct connection to the creators the way that we are, and we live in a great age for doing that. And I think Kickstarter is the perfect platform to do that. So we really see this as the beginning of a very long campaign of interfacing with our fans and our audience and the people who support us.
Wow. Yeah, I can see for the Australian community anyway as well. I mean, not it'll be the same everywhere, but obviously I'm in Australia and I do know a lot of Australian creators, and that sort of information would be so valuable to them that I feel that's just such a winning sales pitch, and you can tell that you mean it as well, and you're not just sitting here reading off a book and getting that information. It's coming from the heart, and that's really, really cool. Could you walk
real quick though, just to on that point, because I saw that Troy Ellington said that he was in. Well, and one of the things we really want to do is be mindful of tariffs. We understand like the economy and the business, at least in the States, is super crazy and unreliable. And so we've told people in the description that if you are international, we're going to try and circumvent that as best we can. Again, we're trying to make sure that the shipping is as reduced as possible, but again, shipping is shipping. But what we're going to do is Keith and Christopher are going to do a book signing plate for all international backers. So wherever you are, Australia, Europe, or anything like that, if you pledge from abroad outside of the North American area, we will send you, I mean, even Canada, I guess we'll include, but at the same time, all that to be said is that we want to give back to those international backers as well, because we know it's expensive. And as much as we would like to control the narrative of shipping, we can't. We're not the government, obviously. And so what we can do is give back an extra thing to be like, hey, we know we're a new company. We know this is a new book, and we know you're taking a risk with your money, and we just want to give you that extra reward, so to speak. So I want to make sure we say that. So Troy, wherever you are, my friend, expect a nice book plate to come along with it.
And part of that also is that, because of our history in video games, and obviously our recording studios and our relationship with actors and celebrities and music and sound, we feel that as creators, and obviously we're working in the medium of comic books and graphic novels, but like what we're doing with Dead Meat, we're adding in all of this value to be able to do an audio drama and doing things in the digital space that kind of bridges between graphic novels and storytelling and other things. So I think what you're going to start to see from us in the future and in the next couple of years is a very much a hybrid of what we're doing in video games and what we're doing in graphic novels, and finding a new way to connect to our audiences that is still very respectful to the idea of print and hand-drawn, no AI work. There is a space for AI for creators like ourselves to use it as a tool, but not to replace the creative element, but taking this digital platform that, that we're all starting to emerge and learn from, and bringing that with what we're doing, this handcrafted work, and finding our audience that way. So we really want to kind of use what we're doing as a little bit of an olive branch to bring together the video game space and the graphic novel space.
And that's two worlds that definitely work well together. Absolutely. It is a shame about shipping, but it is true. There's really not much you can do about it. I know that I have to be very selective with what Kickstarters I back. Usually for myself, I get sold on if it's a hardcover, if it's a slipcase, things like that. That usually just sells it to me. But on not only do you have that, but this artwork, man, it's just, I can't talk enough about it, because I've gone on record plenty of times of saying that because I've got bad eyesight as well, I usually read and don't really absorb the art that much. It usually takes other people to be able to point out things to me and say, hey, did you see that or not? I read my new comics digitally. So that's because I just read so much and can't afford it all. And it goes panel to panel. And that's made me appreciate art so much more. But with this, it just stands out. Like, I can't imagine flipping through these pages the way that I normally do and just be reading the story and going to the next page. I can literally see me looking at these pages and just absorbing this artwork as well as reading it. And that's pretty rare for a fan like myself. So that's really cool.
We appreciate that. And all the artwork that you've been seeing, those are close-ups of individual panels, right? We're not doing special promotional pieces or artwork that's out of there. Obviously, we have the cover and a few pieces that we did do for some of the splash pages, but everything that we're showing to the fans right now, all the art we're putting out there, and probably too much art, is that's all panels right out of the book. Christopher has just such an amazing cinematic style. And one of the things, if you go on Christopher Schei's his Instagram, and if you just look up Studio Ronin or Christopher Schei, you'll see a lot of his artwork. He's been doing posters of all of the classic movies from The Thing and Star Wars and Chud and any movie you can imagine. He's been doing his own specialty covers, and he's been imagining it just with his art style. And I've already been a fan. I mean, we're such close friends, and our kids have grown up at the same time, and we've been like brothers over the past 20 years. And I am such a fan of his work as he is of mine. And it's great because we re-inspire each other. And he started doing these movie posters, and they have become so viral, and people have been sharing them because it's a new imagining of all these classic movies that we all grew up with. And I just love that in Christopher, because he's just a nerd and a geek the way we are. And he's just sort of fanning out and showing how his artwork could reimagine, a cover for a classic motion picture. And so the fact that we have that on every single panel of our book is just, I'm so excited for people to read this book now.
Yeah, that sounds great. I'm definitely going to have to check that out. And I guess that leads me, you've answered a little bit of it already, but that leads me to the next question of, can you walk us through your process for creating a book like this with so much talent on board? How do you guys get together and work out step 1 to step 2 and the flow of that?
I think every project's an organic origin. You might have an idea as a writer, you might have an art piece that inspires you, there might be a story that's already existing or a character that's there. In the case of Frost Road, I was coming off of large projects like Ascend, where it's a $150 million motion picture. It's like Lord of the Rings meets The Matrix, with angels and demons. It's like so big that when everyone saw the book blow up on Image and we were selling out everywhere and everyone was going crazy and we were getting approached by Hollywood, everyone's like, we love your book and you can't direct it and you can't write it. And then we're just going to license it. And it's like, wow. And it was really a fascinating thing as a creator, as a first-time creator, to realize you did something that was really successful and put you in prison right away, that you couldn't even get to work on your own stuff because it was too big. And even though I'm directing and working with talent, celebrities on these $150 million video games, $150 million motion picture is completely out of the question. You just, they're different mediums and worlds. So I started to realize that as a creator, I needed to tell stories that maybe I could direct. And Frost Road was an attempt at telling that story. So when I started to write it, I was collaborating with my friend Brandon Humphreys, and we were working on a few story ideas together. And we had this really scary idea of a signal and a town that was sort of wiping out the town, and the people themselves were tearing themselves apart. And so the idea that instead of a monster, it was they were their own monsters, right? That they were actually the worst threat than some other creature would be. And so I just kind of ran with this idea as a screenplay, and I figured that we could do it on a budget. We could do the film as a horror film and do something that was there. And I'd start to collaborate with Trevor Goring just to figure out what my shot list was going to be and how I was going to storyboard this, and to be able to explain to a film producer saying, here's a film I can direct, here's the screenplay, and here's the boards. And we did animatics for it, and we started putting together, and we instantly had film interest, and we actually got a film deal, and things started moving. And here, Christopher and I had already done Ascend, and we did another book called Dead Speed. And I started slipping pages to Christopher, and I was saying, hey, maybe we could use this as conceptual artwork and we could do things. And Christopher, in his amazing style, started painting Trevor's boards. And we had done an opening scene, the opening 10 pages of the book. There's no dialogue. It's this character that wakes up in the middle of this forest from this car accident, and he's injured, and he's trying to get help. And there's a signal that's blocking the phones and anything else. And he's trying to get help. And he just discovers the town of Frost Road and how they've ripped themselves apart. So this opening was such a fascinating opening because there was no dialogue, and yet it was very compelling to follow this story. And my friend Yuri Lowenthal, who I'd worked with on Prince of Persia and Persona and all these other video games, I said, Yuri, can you pose as the character for me? And we would actually shoot him and get him into costume. And I would take some of our cameras and we would shoot him doing some of the action. And I would take still poses and give that to Christopher. And as he was painting, I said, this is the character, and I want him to be doing this. So we had this like visual dialogue that we were doing back and forth. So even though he had the script and the story, I wanted Christopher to use his creativity to kind of reinterpret what the boards were that Trevor was doing. And meanwhile, I'm also giving him photo reference of what Yuri and the other characters are doing. And so organically, the story just took shape, and we had this compelling opening, and then the story just went from there. So that's kind of a non-traditional way to do a graphic novel. A lot of times an artist and a writer are going to sit down and board out every panel and everything that's there. But I feel that the artwork has to inspire the story, and the story has to inspire the action and the artwork. So I think that each creator is going to find their own way. And this one was a very organic process. And that's why we have such a great team all collaborating together.
Fantastic. It sounds like you're probably not going to have an answer for this one because it sounds so positive, everything you've said. But how do you handle creative differences from other members of your team? If there is any.
Everyone, I came from the music industry, and musicians are the ultimate in creative collaborations, because it's sort of like it, even look at the Beatles, right? And you have all these very talented musicians that all have their own style and other things, but at the core of it, it'll come down to sort of like and I don't mean this in a bad way, but it's like a benevolent dictatorship in a sense that like you have to have someone take a creative lead and other people reinforce that. And that's not to take away the creativity of anybody, but you have to rotate and you have to say, hey, you're going to take the lead now, and then you're going to take the lead, because those creative differences, I think, can destroy. And you see that in bands, and you see that in collaborations after a period of time, because it becomes too lopsided. It becomes one person's vision or somebody else's. So, and I feel that like I've always given my creative vision to other teams and other projects. So when I play a part of writing or directing or working on a video game, I'm lending my creativity, but I'm also being hired to do that. So when I come on to a large video game to direct the talent or doing something, I'm very much honoring the writer's vision or the creative director or whatever the design is of that project. And then it's my job to funnel that, use my creativity, and deliver that to the celebrities or the actors. So I think when you're collaborating on your own work, you have to have a really clear relationship with the people working around you, that you want to honor their creativity and embrace what they're great at, but also sort of say, this is my project that I'm bringing you on. When you're doing yours, I will do the opposite and I will support you. And that way we can all have a voice and we can all do that. But when it's your project, then you don't feel bad that you're overwhelming somebody else's creativity because they were brought on specifically to help you achieve yours. But I think if it's totally organic and it's something that goes back and forth, those relationships are great, but you do have to be able to honor everybody's ideas, or otherwise you'll get into, creative differences, like you said.
Yeah. So for Chris, then being a director, I guess might prove a little challenging for yourself at times, because being the director, I assume a lot of the times you are the boss of the way things are going to go. So how do you focus on that when you're giving people your vision and they like to give their 2 cents on what their vision is?
I mean, I think you have to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? You have to hopefully understand that everyone's in a collaborative mood. And I think the kind of golden rule in Hollywood is there's no assholes, you know what I mean? And excuse me if there's no cursing, but I know there's Aussies, so it's all good. But it's both just having a conversation and being able to just have that dialogue, because it's like, if it's your way or the highway, no one wants to work with you at the end of the day. Like, you have to try and hear people out from their point of view, because at the end of the day, any idea could, in theory, be a better one. It could be the person from either an assistant or an extra or the creative or the right. Like, it could honestly range from a million different ways. It's just, what is the objective and how can it be? How can you work as a team to make it better? And so my thing is like, hey, this is what we have to do. This is how I think we should do it, but also, what do you think? Maybe I'm not the best one to do it. So, like if you think of a better way, great, let's do that. That seems way smarter than me. And then hopefully you give them, the roses, or you give them the spotlight, because everyone deserves their time in the sun. And you just want to make sure everyone is working in the right way. And I don't know, we're very a positive group. We try to stay positive because, again, at the end of the day, like, the people who just like put in bad energy and this just drags it down, and no one wants that, because time is short and we just want to make sure it's being used in the best way possible. So
okay, that's great. Well, then have I got an idea for you? No, I'm just joking. So what comic creators and other artists have influenced you guys? Because I can tell what by the artist on this book, he probably loved his Sandman. You can probably tell that with the way that he's drawn. But what about you guys individually?
I think for me, Keith has music as well, but for me, music is a huge influence on me. I'm definitely a metalhead. I grew up listening to like the classics, Iron Maidens, the Metallicas, and then that grew into, the Warped Tour, early emo, screamo stuff. And now it's like this new metalcore of like Parkway Drive and Beartooth and Spirit Box and all those types of things. So I think for me, like metal and then horror itself, board games. I'm a huge board gamer. Video games. I think it's just kind of what's in pop culture, I guess, and then just finding your little niches. So for me, I think it's kind of those things. So yeah.
And for me, I grew up, especially with my love of comics. Like, I was reading heavy metal, and like as I mentioned earlier, like Arkham Asylum were early books that were really a big influence for me. But I also loved early Ralph Bakshi stuff and Dr. Seuss and the stuff that wasn't for kids, like the stuff that was really more adult, because I realized that I loved the style of hand-drawn or hand-created or hand-painted artwork, but also something that resonated story-wise as an adult. So, and I think that's why, you saw Japanese culture, like manga would really be very successful because it was embraced and accepted by adults. And I remember seeing Akira when it first came out and it was touring in theaters, and the first version of Akira. And it was to me, so mind-blowing to see something that just resonated with me. The music was amazing. The soundtrack was there. The animation was super detailed. It wasn't kind of like cheap animation. It was detailed and articulated. And so I think that combined with my love of video games and having that artistic style blend its way into so many things, you can see that, like, all of us are a product of all the things that we love growing up. And like Chris said, incorporating music and other things, that becomes a big part of that. And I was also a big film buff. So, early stuff for Ridley Scott, Alien and Blade Runner were big influences for me. And so even last year I did it was my first Kickstarter combined with Wesley Snipes and with Adam Lawson, and we did The Exiled. And if you really look at that book, it was very much like Seven and Blade Runner kind of had a baby, right? And that was what we really wanted as the influence of that. So you can kind of see stylistically kind of the genre stuff that we tend to gravitate towards. So the art style has to kind of be along with that.
Yeah, all right, cool.
See, this is the worst thing about having Keith go second. He always gives way better answers, and they're always more detailed. Because then I'm thinking like, oh, I didn't say anything about comic books, because I was like, oh, I'm the comic book guy. I didn't give any comic book answers.
Chris knows more about comics than anybody.
Well, because I was thinking, I'm like, there's the obvious like Turtles and Batman, because those are the 90s things, but like the more modern influences, I guess, is like, oh, there's like Tokyo Ghost with Sean Murphy. There's Klaus with Grant Morrison and Dan Mora. And just, I started thinking of all those other things like Jason Aaron, then Once Upon a Time at the End of the World. So once Keith starts going, then I start thinking of like, oh, I have way better answers now. So.
All right. Well, then for this next question, we'll ask Keith first then and see if we can flip that around. Do any of your personal experiences or beliefs shape your stories or characters?
Oh, 1,000%. I think you can only tell stories from personal experience or at least your passion, right? Because otherwise you're catering to an audience that you don't even understand or know. And I feel that everything has to be grounded in something that you're passionate about. With Frost in particular, I had a teacher that, and I hope I'm not sharing too much stuff that gets him in trouble or anything else like that. But I had a teacher who worked for the CIA, and he was this advanced physics teacher that started telling us privately after school, would tell us all these stories about these experiments that the CIA was doing back in the 60s, all these horrific things. And we were all music and sound students, right? Learning audio engineering and other things. So to learn about the dark side of what that can do and the idea that sound could actually be used as a weapon was fascinating. And he started telling us about things like the brown note and the idea that there were subsonic frequencies that could be used to interrogate or kill people, and yet you can never even hear them. And I was just fascinated because here I am learning about music and I'm writing albums and I'm doing all this angry industrial music, and I'm like, yeah, to have music that could actually kill somebody. So I was fascinated by that idea. And even in Europe, you'll see these like basilica style churches that are these enormous cathedrals. And if you've ever walked into one of these big basilica style churches, everyone gets really quiet because there's like a sense, there's like a weight of that. And the reason why that is, and this might be getting a little bit too much into the weeds, but basically even the smallest whisper or a footstep is a sound wave. And as it starts to move and echo across these big cross style churches, they hit the far walls and then bounce back bigger and slower and lower. And you start getting hit by these sound waves that are 6, 10, 15 feet long. And they're so low and so long that you can't hear them, but you can feel them. And they call them in like audio engineering, they call them the God frequencies. And the reason why is that they're below what a human ear can hear. But when you get hit by them, it's like if you've ever been in a movie theater or someone passes by with like, a low end subwoofer, you can feel that sub. But imagine something that's so low that it's like an earthquake frequency, something that, maybe dogs or horses could hear. But now imagine that at a volume and an amplification that is 200 times the limit of what your ears could hear beyond the threshold of pain or distortion. And so that's what the CIA was doing. They were hitting these poor people in these sound rooms with hundreds of decibels. And you think about it like, on a mixing console, every 3 decibels, when you're turning up the volume, every 3 decibels is 100% increase in sound. So to be hit by hundreds of decibels by a God frequency, I was like, that is the most terrifying thing you could possibly get. And so that was the inspiration in Frost Road to say, what if we did that on a human level? And the scary part is we actually are doing that. The military is doing it, not for interrogation or other things, but we're doing that for communication and other things where we're using the oceans and other things for communication. And that's why I think you're starting to see mass beachings of whales and dolphins over the past 20, 30 years, this big increase in animals that are killing themselves. And that was very much the inspiration for what we did with Frost Road. And so I know that's kind of a more scientific explanation of, talking about the things you love, but that was what like inspired this story. And I think that to tell it from a human perspective and people realizing that, oh my God, this is happening in the world and this is happening in the oceans. And you see that motif in some of the early stuff that's going on with our stories. And so maybe not personal experience, but at least stuff that I was really fascinated about, growing up.
Wow, you've made me instantly want to Google all of these God frequencies and things like that. Chris, I see what you mean now with Keith's answers. Yeah, beat that, mate. Sorry, but it's your turn now.
Yeah, I'll try and beat that. For me, I'm an up and coming writer in my own way, and so for me, I think you have to be personal. You have to tell the stories you want to tell. I mean, you try to make them those universal kind of truths or universal concepts so everyone can relate, but you don't want to alienate them. So I think in doing personal things, whether it be love or lust or hate or revenge or kind of loss or anything like that, those things can definitely make your story more compelling, but you just have to make your own unique spin. I mean, for me personally, one thing I can tease is that one of my books is I'm a huge tiki fan. I love going to tiki bars and getting myself a tropical drink. And I always thought to myself, like, why hadn't there been like a horror type slasher or something like that? So me and my buddy Kevin Keane, he's one of the artists on Spawn. I haven't really talked about it, but I'm teasing it, is that we're working on that, like a tiki slasher book, because I love horror and I love tiki, but at the same time I just wanted to see, like, could you in theory do that, and how do you make it personal, and how do you make people care about that without it being like a caricature or being kind of anything in a negative connotation. So I fully believe in that idea of just, making it your own, but also trying to touch those kind of universal themes in your own way.
Wow, nice. Okay, I really like that. How much more time do you guys have? I want to make sure I'm not cutting you off.
Well, Chris has to go in a little bit, but we'll stay as long as you'll have us, man.
Okay, sweet. Well, then we'll be back right after this word from our sponsor, Comic Bookaroo, Australia's #1 online comic book store. Comic Bookaroo, proud sponsors of Aussieverse for all your comic book needs. Graphic novels, hardcovers, omnibuses, single issues. Don't forget to pre-order every Sunday at Comic Bookaroo. All right, let's get into some character and world building now. Chris, whenever you have to go, mate, please let us know. I know how awkward it can be when you're on a show and you're like, oh, I got to duck out of here. I don't know when the right time to go is. You just let us know, brother. Okay. So how do you approach character developments in a comic? And I guess a second question to that would be that you could incorporate together would be, what are the key elements that make a character compelling for you guys?
Wow, that's a great question. I think it kind of goes back to my last answer, is that you have to make it kind of universal. Like, well, how does this person relate to it? I guess this is how I'll answer it, is because, like, why should I care about that thing that's happening? Like, what does it, like, why? Like, what is the point? And so it could be big and expansive or small and intimate. It's just, I have to be invested. Like, there has to be that hook in terms of like emotional connectivity for me, in terms of either family or loss or things like that. I feel that's where most of the, in my opinion, the best character work is just to show, like, how do they go from point A to point B? Is it someone who's fearful and kind of shy? How do they become courageous and kind of go through that Joseph Campbell's hero's journey? Or if they're like a Tony Stark type, if they're a jerk, and how do they become selfless? How does he become this warmongering type person to then becoming, I love you 3000, snaps his finger and saves the universe? You know what I mean? Like, you have to kind of see that whole arc of like where they start to where they end. And I think knowing when, how that happens is the best thing. So I think for me, that's the way to do it.
Great answer.
I think for me, when I first started, I was immersed in storytelling, but didn't understand the traditional tropes of how to develop. And I was looking for not only ways to develop the story, but also, like you said, like how do you approach the characters? And while you understand that most people are primarily motivated by self-interest, right? That's just, what are my goals? What am I going to be doing there? For me, when you're doing an ensemble cast or you're writing for multiple characters, how do you create character arcs that all resolve while they're still interacting with each other. In a Western style story, you usually find the traditional hero's journey where, there's a character that's gone through some sort of tragedy or some kind of event, then that arc starts to transpire through the journey of that hero to the point where it pays off into the climax of the story. And there might be other characters that come along for that journey, but it's the resolution of the beginning of that story. If you look at a lot of stories that maybe originate in Asia, for example, like a lot of Eastern stories, you tend to have an ensemble cast, and each character has a slightly different arc because they are all going towards one definite goal, but they're all working together as a group to achieve that. And while you might see a resolution to each story, it's not any one character story, it's the group story. And that's why when you see something in anime or manga or in video games, when we do a lot of the big RPGs, like we just came off of like a Dragon or Persona, you see this ensemble cast going there, and each of them has their own personal motivation, but it tends to be a singular track, and that's why the characters tend to represent an individual emotional arc as opposed to one character having all of those. And I'm fascinated by both because I love Japanese anime and RPGs and the games that we direct, but I also grew up in the West and are used to the hero's journey and the Luke Skywalker trying to fight as part of the rebellion. So when I started to create stories, and the first one I was doing was Ascend, and Ascend was a dream that I had. And it was literally, I had gone to bed at around 11 o'clock and I was away from my email and I was away from my internet and work. I was traveling up by the Arctic Circle on this little boat with my family, just trying to get away from all the big projects we were working on. And in the middle of the night, I woke up with this dream, and literally Ascend, that whole book and that story was panel for panel a dream that I had had. And what was wild about that was that the three main characters, the two brothers and the sister, were all in the middle of this war. The Purgatory Wars are these wars where heaven and hell is collapsed down into the Purgatory Wars, and they send their strongest angels down to earth to harvest souls to keep this war going. And it's like this endless war that was now destroyed heaven, and souls couldn't reincarnate, so they had to literally poach souls to keep the war going. And these two brothers end up having this war between each other as they're banished back to Earth, and their sister becomes collateral damage, and it becomes a war between the two brothers. And this was just a freaking dream that I had. And the weird thing was that when I first had the dream, I was talking to my mother, who was a psychologist, and she had worked in universities and schools kind of teaching about even dream therapy. And she starts telling me that she goes, you realize that each of those characters in your story are different aspects of your personality. Those are all things that manifest through your dreams. And what I started to realize was that the motivation of each of the characters and this ensemble cast, really, if you think about it, it's not just your experiences, but they're different sides of your personality. And if you are trying to achieve a resolution to frustration, at this time, when I wrote Ascend, we were invading, I think it was part of Iraq. And we were, I was at a point where I was going to be drafted into the war. And there was a real threat that there's this ongoing pointless war that we had no idea why we're even fighting this war. And here I could be drafted into this endless thing that I didn't understand. And so my characters, if you really look at the similarities of what I did with Ascend and this endless purgatory war of this thing that's heaven and hell, I kind of manifested this in this dream with heaven and hell and demons and angels. But really that was the terror that I felt as a 20-year-old trying to be in the face of this endless war. So I think creating characters very much comes from not only your experience, but just the different personality aspects that you want to resolve in your life. And if you can create drama and conflict and resolution for that, hopefully you can resolve all those things, and maybe you can avoid therapy. I don't know.
Okay, so one, I have got to read that. That sounds awesome. I am totally on board for it. I need a copy of that. And two, what did you have for dinner the night before to get that dream? Please tell me.
Right? My wife was really mad at me because I had to wake her up. Like I literally woke up at like 3 or 4 in the morning, pitch black. We're on the inside cabin of this boat. My daughter is like 18 months old, so she's sleeping in the cabin with us. And I wake up and I have a dream like this, not that story, but I have a big like movie-esque dream about once or twice a year. And it's the kind of thing where you wake up and it's amazing and all these different visuals and story. And then I was like, oh, okay, I'll go back to bed and I'll remember it in the morning. And I would always lose it every single time. I'd wake up and I'm like, there were cats and it was Arem and like, what? Like you can never figure out what your dream was in the morning. And I didn't have the wherewithal to sit down and write it down because then that would take it out. So what I did in my delusional state is I woke up from this dream, and this dream was the biggest thing I've ever had in my life. And I literally leaned over to my wife with my sleeping daughter nearby, and I wake her up in the pitch black. And it takes me about 20 minutes to explain this dream to her. I'm just telling her about angels and demons and this war and all these things and harvesting and all this other stuff. And meanwhile, I can't see her. I can't see her expression, anything she's doing. And after about 20 minutes, I'm like, so what do you think? And she's like dead silent. And I can't tell if she's fallen back asleep and she was just bored or whatever. But she was like in this stunned silence because, you know, I just unfolded this entire Lord of the Rings Matrix kind of story to her. And she's like, you just dreamt that? And I was like, well, I didn't have it when I went to bed at 11 o'clock. She goes, you have to write this one down. but the thing was that the fact that I told her this dream and I actually got it out, then the problem was it cemented into my mind and I couldn't get those images out of my head. And really that's how I met Christopher, because I couldn't find anyone until I started researching artists to see, like, these are the images I had in my mind. And I started meeting with artists, and I went to San Diego Comic-Con, 20 years ago, and just started going up and down the aisles at Artist Alley, meeting with artists. And a lot of those artists I met with are now some of the biggest ones in the industry, which is fantastic, and became friends with them. But Christopher and I, just instant brothers, and he understood my vision and I loved his work. And that was the beginning of everything.
Wow. Meanwhile, your wife's like, is my husband a creative genius or is there something wrong with him?
Well, I think Chris has to get going, by the way. So we'll say goodbye to Chris.
Yes, thank
Chris,
you, Bo.
thank you so
Appreciate
much
your
for
time,
joining
man.
us, man.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. It was a
Have a good
pleasure
time,
meeting
guys.
you.
Of course.
Thanks,
Thank you.
brother. Take care.
Okay, so let's go on to some challenges, I guess, and advice. What's been the biggest challenge that you've faced as a creator? And you can expand that answer to Out of Frost Road as well, if you like.
100%. I think the hardest part about being a creator, not just now, but just in our industry, is that what do you do with an idea, right? Just because you have a fantastic idea, like I had with Ascend, like, what do you do with that? And I think that's the biggest challenge, is that you're not limited by your creativity, but you're also limited by the gatekeepers and the distribution and the way that the system works. And I think that, Hollywood is fickle and has gone through different iterations. You see, we just went through a strike in Hollywood and where the industry is at, and, the financial status of where the industry runs. And so I think a lot of creators, to some extent, don't know how to get past that. They don't know where to start, and they might have a great idea, but they don't know how to get to their audience. And so I think that's probably the biggest challenge is really not being creative. I think so many people have amazing ideas. I've met with so many people over the years who are just desperate to share their ideas with people. I think the bigger thing is to trust in yourself and don't stop. Just keep going out there and doing it. And it's really the dedication and being relentless that's there. People say, oh, you're so lucky that you got that, or you do things. And I don't really believe in traditional luck. I think luck only is applicable if you're prepared and you're ready to do something. You already have gone through the education, you've gone through the training, and you have something there. So if you are lucky enough to be in the same room at the right time with someone who can help you achieve those things, then maybe that's luck. But luck is all about you being prepared and being educated and being ready to go. So I feel as a creator, like, you can never stop learning. You can never stop trying. You can never stop doing your own thing, because, Frost Road is a story I wrote years ago, and here we are doing a Kickstarter now. But I also feel that you have to just keep trying and keep growing and learning, and hopefully you'll become a better creator and writer. And then as distribution changes, you'll find new ways to get to your audience, the same way that we're experimenting now with Kickstarter and to the community.
Yeah, right. So with your thumb in so many pies, how do you stay motivated in sticking to the one project at a time? Or are you a person that can multitask and have different things going at once? How does that work for you?
I think they medicate people now for probably what I am. You know, like you think that ADD and OCD is something that is a detriment, and I see it as a feature, not a bug. So for me, I've been always like the corncob method, in the sense that you kind of start on one end and you work your way down, and then you kind of rotate, and then you just start over again. It's kind of like painting the Golden Gate Bridge. You know, you're just done with one thing and you have to go all the way back to the beginning again. I think in all forms of entertainment and other industries as well, you're constantly waiting for things. You're waiting for a script, or you're waiting for casting, or you're waiting for funding, or you're waiting for attachments, or you're waiting for production to move ahead. And I think if you are of one discipline and you're only doing one thing, then you're constantly waiting, right? If you're a writer, you're waiting for the artwork. If you're a publisher, you're waiting for the creative team. If you are, an artist, you're waiting for the script. And there's so many things you're always waiting for. So I kind of felt that for me, I just wanted to learn as much as I can. And as doing so, I started to realize I could tell stories in different mediums and different formats, and I could pivot. So while I'm waiting on one project, I could then move on to the next one. But when you're on that project, you are 100% focused in the moment. You're present, you're here, you're not distracted, you're not doing a million other things. You are 100% focused. But then once you get to a point where you can't move forward anymore, you pivot to the next project. And while that is a very ADD kind of thing, especially for Hollywood, I think that intimidates a lot of people, because they're like, why can't you focus on any one thing? But then 700 projects later, like, well, I get things done. So I just have to just start to move and pivot. And I think that's not for everybody. Not everyone can focus on a million things at the same time and still give that attention. So there are some creators who only need to focus and just get it done. And that's the flip side of that, is that you have to get it done. There are some people who are so scared, and they see the level of artwork or writing or quality that someone else does that they aspire to, and they say, well, I'm not that good and I can't get there. So it kind of holds them back from doing things. And when I was doing my band, when I was in Biohazard and Contagion, one of the other musicians had a writing setup, and we would all write at home, and we would kind of come together and then collaborate. So we would kind of orchestrate or do something for the band. We would kind of sequence a song and then bring it together, and then we would collaborate there. And I was over at my bandmate's studio, and he had this song that was just the coolest song ever. It was so amazing. It was so good. And I was like, this is amazing. He goes, yeah, it's not done. I still want to add this. And he was really frustrated, beating himself up. And I said, man, this is incredible. This is really good. He goes, well, I'm going to keep working on it. And so I said, okay, cool. And I said, I'll come back next week and, we'll talk. So sure enough, the next week I came back over to his studio, and he was working on this completely other different track that was equally cool, amazing in its own right. And I was like, wow, this is just as good. It's fantastic. What happened to the song that you were working on last week? And he goes, oh no, this is the same song. I just changed it. And I was like, no, dude, you wrote 2 songs. And so it wasn't like anything was good enough, because he just wanted to keep refining and doing things. And I think as a creator, you have to realize that nothing will ever be finished, ever. Everything, you're going to criticize it. Anything is going to have flaws. Anything is going to be incomplete. And you have to get to a point where you realize it's good enough to ship, and it's good enough to get out there. And you might have a quality bar that is so high that you say it's got to be perfect, but the audience's expectation might be down here. So as long as when you are shipping something that is anywhere above the audience's expectation, even if it's not perfect, you still at some point have to get it out there, and the next one will be better, and the next one will be better. But you can't use that as a way to stop you from moving forward. And as long as you're not below what the audience expects, as long as it's still high quality and it's good, it's marketable and you will grow and you will learn from your mistakes. But I think so many people are afraid to make mistakes and they have so much anxiety about getting their things out there or not being accepted that they're afraid of failure. And I think you can't be afraid to fail. You just have to keep trying and just know that you'll be better on the next one.
Wow, that's pretty cool, man. So would you apply that way of thinking even during your own personal tough times? You know, because we are all human. We do go through, you know, things. Do you find roadblocks when you're going through things like that, or creative roadblocks at least, or is that a non-factor for you?
I think creatively, the best way to reset is to change your environment. I'll travel. I will get out. Like I said, like when I did with this trip, like you get so focused in your work sometimes that it's hard to see the forest through the trees. And I think that you need perspective. You need to get out of your familiar environment to re-inspire yourself, because everything does come from experience and that. So I think creatively, the easiest way to avoid a writer's block is to get as far away from your normal environment. That's not to say spend a lot of money or do other things. Just get out of town, go on a trip, go on a road trip. Just do something that's not familiar. And what it does is your brain is still in creative mode, but now you're having to find a new place to sleep and a new place to eat and a new sleep schedule and all these different things. And suddenly that creative finds a new channel and it manifests itself. So creatively, I think that's the secret that I have found that's always kept me inspired. But the tougher thing is life, right? And, you know, when I was working on Frost, originally, Frost wrote, I started off, as I was saying, as a screenplay that I wanted to do as a film. And we had a massive fire that wiped out our whole studio, and it wiped out my music. I lost 1,000 of my music masters, all my albums, my sound libraries, and all my samplers and keyboards, and all this music I had written for my band and my albums and my motion pictures was just gone. 20 years of work. And I wasn't even here when it happened. I was traveling, you know, with the family, and it happened while we were gone. And while I was still in the middle of directing at the time, I was directing Modern Warfare 2 for Call of Duty and about a dozen other games. And my wife kind of turned to me because we were out of the country, and she said, "What are we going to do? Because we just lost everything, our home, our studios, our work, your library, all your music, your masters." And I just said, it's just stuff. You know, we have our family, we have us, we're still okay. So we'll just build it bigger and better, you know, because we know how. It's the knowledge that you have. So I think life has a way of getting in the way and but it stopped that motion picture. It stopped Frost from getting made. The economy had collapsed during that time, and funding for the film went away. And so even though it was a great story and I really loved it, and I had these storyboards I was working with, I was like, you know what? It's not the right time. And the story is timeless. So it's not like this was a 10-year-old story. But the idea is that maybe it's not the right time right now because life has other things. And then this little thing called COVID comes along and wipes out the planet, you know? And so I think that, you know, life is going to have a way of stopping your plans in ways that you don't expect. So I don't think you can put your dependencies on, external things. You just have to be happy with what you do and just know that your creativity is going to motivate you and you're going to do that. And if life, you know, deals you, you know, a bad deck of cards, then you just have to find another way to play them. And that's kind of how you move forward.
Yeah, mate, that's a great saying. I like that one. Put that on a t-shirt. So I guess I'm starting to work out this answer already, but I'd like to know, so how do you handle criticism? And on top of that, what do you think's been the most valuable feedback you've ever received?
I love getting criticism. I don't take it personally because I know, like I said earlier, like I'm not afraid of making mistakes, and I almost grow more from making mistakes. Right. That's not to say that if someone says, "Hey, don't put your hand in a fireplace," that you know you're going to get burned. I don't need to learn that lesson firsthand, but I do like learning by trying and doing things and not being afraid to fail. So when people give you criticism and they give you their feedback, it's one thing if it's malicious and it's other things. I mean, I think that, you know, online you see trolls and people that are saying things that they would never say to a person's face, although these days with politics and the way they are, maybe they would say it to your face. But I think that, you know, a lot of people have their own personal frustrations and other things. And so I think, you know, the trolls aside of wanting to vent out and be able to do things, I really do appreciate the feedback and people's input and learning and growing from that, right? I think as a creator, you can't operate based on your audience. And I'm not trying to say that in a selfish way to say that you don't want to do something that's not commercially successful. But I think if you're only creating for other people and not for yourself, then you're not inspired, because you just think, well, this will be a hit, or this will be popular, and this will the kids would like. And it's like, that's BS. Like, you can't do that, because then you don't like it. So I think you always have to do something as a creator selfishly, in a sense, that's something that inspires you. So you are motivated to do that. And you do wake up in the middle of the night and have a story that's worth telling your wife and having her kill you so you don't wake up your 18-month-old daughter. But I think that you grow and you learn from those things, and you will learn, and you'll be your own biggest critic. I mean, like, my bandmate, he was beating himself up, but criticism is the kind of thing that I think, as long as it's healthy and constructive, and then you can weigh it and say, that's a perspective I hadn't thought about. And I think it challenges you. I think someone asks you, why do you do these things? Or why is that character doing things? It makes you kind of reevaluate it. And one of the hardest things I think as a creator to do is show someone else your work before it's finished. Because as a creator, at least for myself in music or writing or artwork, I see the completed picture in my mind. When I'm writing a song, or I'm scoring a film, or I'm painting something, or I'm writing a story, I see what the end goal is in my mind before I ever start. I kind of just have that ability to kind of, even if I'm discovering it and growing as it evolves, I still know at least the aesthetic of what I want to do. But the problem is, if it's a work in progress, as all creators are in some work in progress, when you show that to someone else, they're only seeing what's in front of them. They're not seeing what's in your head. And what's a really interesting and scary thing to do is share that, because I'm playing a song for my wife and I'm like, oh, okay, the guitars are going to be over here. We're gonna have this bass line over here. We're gonna have these samples over here, and then this orchestration. And she's like, but it's a drum line, it's like, and they just hear the drums. And I'm like, yeah, but this is going to be here. And you try to explain it, and you hear things differently when you share it with someone, or you see things differently when you show it to someone, or you talk about it out loud and you realize how dumb that sounds to explain it, even though in your mind that dream was very, very lucid. So I think that criticism is really interesting, because it forces you to then make it tangible and work through it, or improve it, or rework it. And as long as it doesn't deflate you and take away your inspiration, I think it's a very healthy thing to receive that.
Yeah, right. Okay. And what about the best feedback you've ever received, do you think?
The best feedback? I think the best feedback is to kind of just always do what you love to do and follow that dream. I've had people say, you know what, even if it's not perfect, do it. Don't worry about the audience. Don't worry about that. I had a producer, a very big producer, and I said, well, this isn't commercial. I'm doing this because it's like, I love this story. And I was working on one of my first films, and I was like, yeah, but it's like a horror, found footage, thriller. It's not going to be mainstream. And he goes, I don't care. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't matter if it's not successful. Just get it out there and do it, because it's your vision, and people will see that, and you'll find your audience and you'll find stuff. So that kind of gave me permission to not fail, but just to throw it out there and not worry about the fact that it doesn't have to make money. I think people who are motivated by money then have a different goal. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with money, because that's what sustains us and keeps us going. And it is a business, and you have to have a healthy respect for that. But that can't be the motivation. That just has to be the benefit and the goal of sustainability, as opposed to the creative vision of what you're trying to achieve.
So do you feel the need to stay up to date with the latest trends and developments in any of these industries, or do you sort of ignore that and just do your own thing? And if you do stay up to date with them, how do you do that?
I think it's impossible to truly be up to date. I see things, I have children, and I see things that they're attracted to, and I see cyclical things that come back around, and some things that they're into that I don't understand at all, and other things that I'm like, oh, that's a derivative of what I loved that's there. And, recently, like in video games, like I'm helplessly addicted to Helldivers, and I've been playing Helldivers with my son and other friends. And when I first saw it, I was like, this is Starship Troopers. This is like a complete ripoff of something that I saw like 20 years ago. But then I'm like, yeah, but it's freaking awesome. And it's like, I love playing this. And suddenly you realize that ideas come around and they manifest in other ways. And so, and you see that zombies will come around and ninjas will come around and robots will come around and monsters will come around and vampires will come around. And it's like, all of a sudden there's a new, vampire thing. And it's like, yeah, but vampires were big 15 years ago and then 30 years ago and then 60 years ago and then 100 years. So I think that, we're going to have these age-old things that will always be timeless, and there'll be new interpretations and other things. So I think in some respects, you have to have a healthy finger on where society is and taste. And right now, you're seeing short attention span theater where people don't have the patience for a slow burn movie like The Shining or Halloween or Alien, films that I grew up with that I loved. But Frost Road is very much a slow burn kind of story, right? And it has my passion and my love of those old style stories, but hopefully it will resonate as a brand new kind of thing now within the graphic novel space. So I think that things will come around, and you have to do things that obviously you grew up with and that you're motivated to, but you can't completely ignore what's happening, because otherwise, if it's not relevant or it doesn't resonate, then it'll find an older audience, but it might not find a newer audience. And so by working in video games, you're constantly looking at trends that are 2 or 3 years in advance, because it takes about 2 to 3 years to develop a large AAA video game. So when you're working on performances and story and aesthetics, you have to look at what's going to be popular in a few years from now, as opposed to what was popular 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I think as long as you have a taste, that you can incorporate that.
Yeah, that's a really good point. I'd never even considered that, actually. And it's funny as well, because I think this is just my own opinion. I think we're in a bit of a contradictory time at the moment, where what you said about the short attention span is 100% true. However, I also find the opposite is starting to become true as well. When you have movies like The Brutalist and things like that are like, 4 hours. And I think there are people out there as well that, yeah, the general populace is the short attention span, but I think the slow burn is starting to come back a bit as well, which I hope it does, because I love that stuff.
I'm with you on that, and I love that. I think when you look at Stanley Kubrick films and other films of that era, you realize that he was creating films for a 40-foot screen. He wasn't creating it for an iPhone, right? And if you think about Peter Jackson and doing Lord of the Rings, like, you would never envision these massive CG battle scenes that you were going to be watching on your iPad or a phone or something to that effect. That was designed for a theatrical experience. And I think because of media and streaming and technology and just the way society has evolved, it's hard to get someone to go to a theater, to be in a dark room for 90 minutes or 2 hours or 3 hours and sit there with no distractions, no phone, no email, no text, no nothing, and be absorbed in a linear movie that you have no ability and no agency to change the story. And that takes a certain type of experience. To some extent, it's kind of like virtual reality, in a sense that you are completely immersed in a space. And that's what I loved about theater, is that it's kind of like what we would think of as like a suspension of disbelief, that, if I'm watching Alien or Romulus, suddenly you're in that world and you're transported into that same space and you're empathizing with the characters, and you were thinking, like, what would I do? And people are screaming in the theater, like, don't go over there, don't do that, because they're feeling like they're in the movie. Whereas, seeing something on a phone or streaming something on Netflix or doing something on YouTube or anything that's there, it has its place, and it's great to share stuff. And sure, I doom scroll every morning. I just love to jump on and just kind of mindlessly kind of wake myself up. But it's a different experience than going into a movie in a theater. And when my daughter first started getting into horror films, she was watching terrible horror films. And I love all horror and all films. But I was telling my daughter, I said, look, what you were watching is a very bad, cheap derivative of a classic. And she didn't even know what those classics were. And I said, okay, There was a theater here in Los Angeles before COVID called the ArcLight, and they had the best picture, the best sound. You could reserve seats, and it was a theater-going experience. Like if you loved cinema, you would go to the ArcLight because they had just the best of the best. And so they had a remastered 35 millimeter print of John Carpenter's The Thing, and I got her front center, perfect seats. No phone, no internet, no distractions. And her and I sat there and watched this film, and she was mesmerized by this film. And at the end of the movie, she turned to me and she goes, "Dad, I understand. I get it now." And then she went back and she started seeing all the classics. And then she understood why The Shining was important, why things like American Werewolf in London and Alien and all these things were foundational. Because then when you see something come back around and you see like Black Mirror have a werewolf transformation in the new series, and you're like, that's an homage to American Werewolf in London. Now, sure, you can appreciate it as a new sort of cinema fan, but to understand that they were paying homage to that, or you go and see it, right, and you see the head sprout the legs, and you realize it's a throwback to The Thing, and the line of dialogue that say no freaking way. The idea is that now you have a cultural appreciation of where we come from just in something like horror, and to see a younger generation understand that. By going back to the cinema and the classics that I grew up with and other people did, you can see that influence now in new things, and that's how I think how you stay relevant is having an appreciation of the past and then incorporating it back for new generations that didn't get to experience that the way they were intended.
Yeah, it's funny, because I'm in my 40s now as well, and I've seen what I think is all the classics, but it occurred to me about 5 years ago that all of these movies I haven't re-seen for probably about 20 years. And I've been sitting down now for the last 5 years and re-watching all of these films like Jaws and I don't know, whatever, And it's fascinating to see all of these things as an adult now, as opposed to like your younger days. And man, it's so good.
An interesting film like that for people is to see Apocalypse Now, because Apocalypse Now was not only inspired by obviously the classic literature and other things, but then setting it into Vietnam. When I saw that when I was in high school and in college, I was very much the age of a soldier going to war. So that movie meant something totally different, right? Because, it's blood and it's guts and it's warfare and you're the same age and you can identify with the soldiers. But then I saw that later in my 20s and in my later 20s, and I was like, oh, wow. And then you realize the horror of war and not just the action of fighting and the testosterone of it, but also now you're realizing the impact of it. And then when you get older and you see it again, and all of a sudden you start to see it from Kurtz's view and you're like, oh, wow. And then you start to see the psychological side of it. And that movie means something completely different based on where you are in your life, to see the exact same movie that's kind of like a icon in history, and yet when you see it and go back, it means something totally different. And so going back and seeing those other movies is amazing because they just change your perception of it.
Yeah, 100%. We'll start wrapping things up now. Let's take a look at the look ahead. What projects other than Frost Road are you currently working on that you can talk about? And what can anybody that knows you and your fans expect next?
So Kickstarter is a really fascinating aspect for us, because now instead of going through traditional publishers and other things, we've been able to go out straight to the audience and do these deluxe high quality books that might not sell the same numbers that we would do if we were going to normal distributors, but we can also do a much higher quality thing for the fans. So we have 6 Kickstarters set up over the next 3 years. And every 6 months, we're going to be rolling out new projects. And people who know our history and some of the books that we've already done that kind of were foundational for us, you might see those come back around. This book with Frost Road is going to be shipping and out at San Diego Comic-Con. So anyone who meets us in San Diego, I think, is going to be very excited, because not only is the book going to fulfill this July, but our next Kickstarter isn't being announced at San Diego Comic-Con. So we haven't announced what that's going to be, but people are going to be fascinated by what it is, because it's going to be the next evolution, not of this story, but of us as creators and what we learned from this Kickstarter. And I think people are going to be excited because there's going to be a tour and a lot of immersive theater and escape rooms and other things that are going to be tied in with our next property. And so we're going to kind of show our love of video games and immersive theater and also graphic novels and horror and sort of everything that we're putting together on Frost Road. And we're going to evolve that through the Kickstarter community. So even though people are going to see our games coming up, and we have a lot of amazing games that are going to be launched this year, and we're excited to do those, our original IP is going to be spilling into movies and television shows and animated series and these new graphic novels that you'll be able to see through Kickstarter.
Wow. So it really is a good jumping on point now to start getting on there with all your projects, isn't it? I feel like we've really come at a really good time.
Yeah, we're not, I mean, and we have a history, like, you know, obviously it's an amazing industry, and it supports so many different types of artists. For us, since we've been around for so long, we're kind of a known commodity. People know PCB Productions. We have new websites now that are showing a lot of our new projects. So people are now getting introduced to our originals as opposed to just the service work we've done on all these big game franchises. So we're hoping that people realize that PCB is going to be here for the long haul, and we're going to be expanding out. And people like Chris Yates, who you met today, and other people here at PCB, we're going to be expanding out a lot of other ideas, not just stuff that I've created, but our other collaborators, and start to have more of a brand for PCB. Yeah,
fantastic. Do you see your style or of storytelling evolving in the future, or do you feel like you've got it down pat and this is the way that you're going to be moving forward?
I am in my infancy. Like, this is just the beginning. I am learning so much, and now that I'm getting to meet other screenwriters and other artists and collaborating with other people, I'm realizing that there are so many other ways to tell stories, and not just through graphic novels, but like what we're doing with these motion comics and audio dramas and hopefully motion pictures and animated shows. I'm hoping to grow as a director and as a showrunner and a creator, that I can then hopefully, you know, help in the production and producing these shows, but also just as a storyteller. Like, I can tell that there's so much to learn and grow and learn. And I've been collaborating now with some really big established writers that have done some of my favorite pieces. And they have been mentoring me just as my career is going, just to not just learn the Hollywood of it all, but just becoming a better storyteller. And as film is changing and streaming is changing and video games are changing, I'm kind of honored to kind of be included in those circles. And so that's why we're trying to give back to the community too, because, you know, I might be, you know, 20 years into this career and helping, you know, people just starting, but I'm looking at people who I've been looking up to, and they're still teaching me. So you never stop learning. The moment you stop learning is the moment you start dying. So I hope I keep growing until I don't.
That's another good one. Put that on a shirt. I like that. Okay, so second last question of the night would be, if you could create a comic about any topic or genre that you haven't explored yet, what would that be?
I am writing a story right now. I have two stories, but I have one in particular that goes back to when I was a kid, when the Cold War was at its height. And I grew up in a small town in Arizona. And one of the things that scared me the most, I think, about that time, as a lot of people did of my generation, was that we were like number 10 on the Russian nuke list. Like, we knew that, you know, that because of Davis-Monthan Air Force Base and all the military activity that was in Arizona where I was growing up, that we were very high on the nuclear attack list. And so I think I was very much a product of the Cold War, of knowing that anxiety that you could be attacked at any moment and other things, not like the 50s and 60s where people were dunking under their desks and other things, but just the reality that things like war games and other things were real, and that, you know, that you could be put into a war, and what we saw in Iraq and Afghanistan and other wars where you could do that. So I'm kind of going back into that and writing a story right now that is sort of exploring some of the height of what was going on at the Cold War, and some of the the operations that were going on and trying to tell stories, maybe, or a story in particular of that time that really fascinated and scared the hell out of me. And I very much have been passionate about aliens and about military and sort of that thriller side of things. So I kind of want to pull together some of my love of all of that and try to tell a story that's sort of half fiction and half not, and bring it together. So I'm hoping I can tell a really neat, fascinating thriller story that's there. So hopefully one of my next books will kind of explore that. And then the next book that's going to be announced at Comic-Con is going to be into the children's horror kind of side of things, if you kind of think about a Tim Burton kind of thing. So I think people will be very surprised that that came from PCB and the kind of stuff we're doing, because it's a complete departure from all the stuff they know from all the video games and books we've done so far.
All right, fantastic. Let's take one more look at Frost Road, because while you were talking, I actually backed it myself. Now, the testament to this is that usually when I have guests on that have got Kickstarter, I usually do get a copy of at least an issue, and I get to read it so that I know what I'm talking about when the interview comes on. This was one of those rare times that was not the case. I actually haven't read Frost Road. I didn't know what it was about other than reading the Kickstarter, and I have been sold on it during this interview. So that should sort of sell you on it just a little bit. And I went for the slipcase as well. You can better believe it. So let's take one more look here at Frost Road. We have this amazing artwork. Death follows its own path. You can get this wonderful slipcase that we did get a lucky look at just earlier from Keith. You have many tiers that you can get. Look at this. Doesn't that freak you out? This creepy art. This just looks, I love that one, actually. I love that. That is so cool. And look at the lettering. It does not follow your traditional sort of comic book lettering, which to me sets it apart. And it's kind of exciting because it's almost like a little voice in your head as you're actually reading through it. There is a few videos that you can click on here. There is all the team as well, which we'll just fast forward past and go through all the tiers. You have the digital edition for only $20, the $40 deluxe hardcover edition, the $60 hardcover with the slipcase, and then if you want the really sweet stuff, then scroll on, because you have Q&As for $100. You have artist and storytelling masterclasses for $150, interactive creative masterclasses for $250, exclusive virtual meet and greet with cast and creators for $350. Go to San Diego Comic-Con and do the whole meet and greet there. As you can see in the big red bold letters, some of these are also limited to about 10, 15 or 20 backers. There's also the ultimate industry insider experience. You can also get the private PCB production studio tour and masterclass, as well as the Hollywood executive industry access. And the very last one, I believe, is the retail store, which you can buy multiple bulk packages and get them sent to your store. We also have stretch goals galore. There is heaps going out back to the community, not just going into their pocket. This is making sure that the community can learn, discover, and grow themselves, which is really fantastic as a kickback to the rest of the world. If you don't know where to find Frost Road, go to Kickstarter, type in Frost Road. It will pop up. If that is too difficult, I don't know why it would be, but you know, you've got to play devil's advocate. You can go to the description of this video, click the link. It will look something like that, and that will take you to Frost Road. I heavily implore you to go check it out. As you can see, they are on the 26 days to go, 121 backers already within the first week. This is going to be fantastic. An apocalyptic horror graphic novel, Frost Road. Go check it out now. Which leads me to the very last question of the night, Keith. Well, maybe for you, Dave. No, me, Day, you not. I'm getting confused now. If I was to turn around to you, good sir, and say, what is Aussieverse? What would your answer be?
Oh my God. I think for me, it's something that completely encompasses everything we've been talking about, from our passion of comics and stories and graphic novels and films and pop culture and everything from horror and sci-fi and everything in between. And with the guidance and expertise and the ability to bring together a community of people who are passionate about that. So from what I have observed, and also, getting to talk to you and everything that you're representing, I think that you are a conduit and a tastemaker for people who love all of this pop culture, and finding it a way to distill it and introduce it to the audience that gets to meet people that are just as passionate about making it as the people who appreciate it.
Wow, that was a really good answer, Keith. I really appreciated that. It's been a pleasure having you on. I've loved meeting you. We'd love to have you back. I do have to inform you, though, that as great an answer as that was, unfortunately, it was wrong. The correct answer is Aussieverse is and always will be for life. This has been Keith Arem, the creator and writer of Frost Road, CEO of PCB Productions, as well as earlier Chris Yates, the director, Special Projects and Outreach. Go check them out. They have so much more coming. They have been a wonderful guest and wonderful additions to Aussieverse, and we can't wait to have them back on. We will see you next time for our FOC video next Wednesday, as well as many more things coming up. And as I just said, Aussieverse is and always will be what, James? For life. Catch you next time.